Today on Fear and Greed, finally some relief for renters across the country with growth rates in rents now flat across the capital cities. Qantas delays flights to South Africa to avoid running into SpaceX debris, and the world's third largest burger chain, Wendy's, set to open locally today. Plus, consumer sentiment stays negative for the 35th month in a row and hopes that a Mideast ceasefire is close. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Wednesday, the 15th of January 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, a bit of good news for renters, with the pace of growth in monthly payments across the capital cities now flat.
Long time coming, I'd say. In 2023, rents were up 8%. Last year, they're up 5%. But during the December quarter, at least in the capital cities, they were flat. In the regions, they're up a little over 1%. But for all those people out there who have been struggling to pay their rent, particularly when it increases, looks like there won't be too many more of those on the horizon. Let's hope so. Obviously, very good news for renters, not so much investors. I suppose, the problem with this story, of course, is that rents are up about 36% nationally since COVID. That's nearly $9,000 a year on a median rent. So you've really struggled over the last few years. Hopefully there'll be more relief going forward. Rent spending is now about 33% of pre-tax income. Now, this is according to CoreLogic. It's been tracking this idea of rent spending as percent of income since it began in 2006. Never has it been this high. Never has it been 33%. So a good news story after some really, really bad news stories, I suppose. The main reasons are basically demand side. Net migration has come off the boil a little bit in Australia. There's a little bit more stock that's happening on the supply side. In terms of what it's meant that more people are living at home for longer. Don't know about that. Household with 6 20-something-year-olds in it. And also, 5 20-something-year-olds and one nearly 20-something-year-old. Also, that whole COVID trend of smaller households, that's now unwinding. And so we're actually getting larger households again.
You could become a landlord within your own house, really, couldn't you?
Well, that's what you call bored, Michael. Yes. Your kids are too young. And it's really hard to collect sometimes. That's what I'd say. Some kids are better. Some boarders are better. Others not so good. It tends to be the ones that eat all the food and use the electricity and the internet. They're the ones who pay least, it seems.
They also figure that they're paying a nominal fee. They may as well make the most of it and use absolutely everything they can. It's like when you stay in an Airbnb, right? And they've got like some complimentary chocolates and you're just like shoving it all into your bag as quickly as you can.
And they say, please turn the air conditioning off if you're going out for dinner. Yeah. As if.
No, come on. No, not going to happen. All right, that is a bit of good news, though, overall for renters. Now, Sean, consumer sentiment, how about this, has fallen for a second consecutive month, but purchasing intentions suggest upside in 2025.
Yeah, so this comes from the Westpac Melbourne Institute survey. It was done when the Aussie dollar was falling, so that probably hurt confidence. It's been negative for 35 months, consumer sentiment. Any reading under 100 is negative. It's currently just a little over 92. The thing is, if you look through that top line index, some of the components are definitely improving. Why do we care? Because consumer sentiment encourages spending. If you have more spending, you have a stronger economy. Having said that, some of the retailers in the last few days, City Chic yesterday, Myer, Premier Investments, they've reported not so strong sales growth. So I'm not quite sure how those two marry up, but certainly the outlook for sentiment is somewhat better.
Sean, we've got still a fair bit to come. I want to mention the interview that you have coming up after the show today, because it's something a little bit different. You are speaking, and this is still part of our summer investing series, you're speaking with Steve Ween from Jarden Australia.
Yeah, look, it's a great chat with Steve. It's about healthcare companies, but we've focused pretty much on the weight loss companies. So Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk are the two big ones. Think Ozempic, that type of stuff. But not just on those companies, what it means for other companies that might be affected by these weight loss drugs. One of the examples we talk about is ResMed, the sleep apnea group. Some analysts think that its future is somewhat clouded because these weight loss drugs help reduce sleep apnea. So what does that mean for a company like ResMed? Really fascinating chat.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's coming up after the show. We still have a fair bit to cover, Sean. I cannot wait to talk about SpaceX and Qantas and flights being delayed because of space debris of all things. We're talking Wendy's coming to Australia. So much more. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Qantas and South African Airways have delayed or rerouted flights between Australia and Southern Africa as a result of the re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere of Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets. This is fascinating.
It is a very fun story. The re-entry mostly occurs in the southern Indian Ocean, and that's because basically there's very little land mass in that region. What Qantas has said is that it's had delays of up to 6 hours for flights between Australia and South Africa because they fear the impact of flying debris on the planes. It told the Australian, or Qantas told the Australian, that over the last few days, several flights were delayed for up to 6 hours due to advice of re-entry from the US government. Now, this is a real problem. Qantas has been trying to speak to SpaceX and refine, is how they put it, refine when re-entries were occurring. But sometimes because of the weather conditions, where launch sites are, etc., it's really difficult to know exactly when it's going to happen. And what we're talking about often, the SpaceX, the rocket takes off, but it's the debris from that rocket launch once it's heading into space that's actually falling back to Earth. That's really what we're talking about. And so Qantas is getting quite frustrated with this because they're not really getting much of a heads up when it's going to happen. So as a result, they have to delay flights.
Do you remember a couple of years ago, there was a whole lot of SpaceX debris found throughout the Snowy Mountains in kind of southern New South Wales, and it was from one of the capsules from space. I think it was the Dragon capsule,
Right.
and it broke up, and suddenly farmers in kind of basically rural, regional New South Wales, around kind of towns like Jindabyne, were finding these big chunks of metal in their paddocks. And suddenly it just dawned on everyone, hang on, this has come from space. And it emerged that it was from SpaceX. And SpaceX finally actually acknowledged that, yes, this is ours. And
Wow.
Luckily, it was in a fairly kind of sparsely populated part of Australia. But it does show there is a risk from these things coming back through the atmosphere. Sean, moving on, a relatively unknown Chinese investor is continuing to lift his stake in Star Entertainment, triggering speculation that the casino could be broken up.
Huang Qingchang has spent about $30 million since September last year, buying up 6.52% of Star Entertainment. He's now the second biggest shareholder behind pub owner Bruce Matheson. Bruce Matheson owns just under 10%. Now, Matheson told the media yesterday he doesn't know Mr. Huang. The share price itself, down 40% last week. That's after it said it was burning through cash, only had a little over $70 million left. The New South Wales and Queensland governments have both said no to a bailout. It jumped on Monday on the news of the buying by Mr. Huang, up again yesterday. Investment bank speculation is that it's a bit of whether he takes over totally or he buys the business so it can be broken up. There's a bunch of individual assets that can be sold. Now, the individual casinos could be sold, though that's less likely. The Darling Hotels on the Gold Coast in Sydney, the 50% it owns of Queen's Wharf in Brisbane. So there could be an asset sale, but it's just very interesting that this Mr. Huang has decided, who no one really knows, has decided to buy up Star.
Yeah, certainly one to watch. What else happened in the markets yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 finished up 0.5% to 8,231 points. The big banks fell hard on Monday. Yesterday morning, they recovered ground, but then they fell back in the afternoon. They finished flat to lower. Tech stocks had a tough time of it. Michael, good day for the iron ore miners, finally, led by Fortescue Metals and BHP. Iron ore is back above $100 a ton. That's after figures yesterday showed that China's imports of the steel ingredient have reached a record level. Retailers were mixed. Coles did well. Wesfarmers was down. Property energy groups trended higher. Myer and Premier Investments tumbled on Monday after the two suitors announced poor sales and revenue figures. They sold off again yesterday. Myer was down another 3%. And apart from the Star, the other big mover yesterday was Ingenia Communities, basically an investor and developer of retirement homes. It upped its profit guidance. Shares jumped 13%.
Probably won't come as any great surprise to you, Sean. There was more barb throwing in federal politics yesterday. The battleground yesterday. The cost of living. Probably no surprise about that one either.
How are we going to cover this story, Michael? Because every day we're just going to get abuse. Maybe we'll just read the comments from the two and leave it at that. Not comment, just sort of,
No commentary whatsoever.
Okay.
Just inject a bit of colour into the show by just reading their words.
Yeah. Anthony Albanese, quote, "The next election will be about Labor with cost of living relief and a plan to build Australia's future. Peter Dutton costing people more and taking Australia backwards. I am not sure what he does about energy security in the 2030s because he has got no answers to it before some fantasy of a nuclear reactor comes on in the 2040s. Peter Dutton, if we continue to see softening in the Australian dollar, if we continue to see inflation run rampant under this government, then we will see interest rates stay higher for longer. I want to see interest rates come down. I think they would have already come down by now if there'd been a coalition government in place." Look, that's what they said. Let's just dump federal politics until something interesting happens. How about that?
Okay.
Good.
Who decides if it's interesting though, Sean?
Me.
Oh, okay.
Me.
Me. All right, let's see how we go. For burger lovers, Sean, and I count myself as a burger lover. I know you're a fish guy now, aren't you?
Fish guy, yeah.
Yeah. You've gone full on pescatarian, haven't you? Maybe Wendy's has a fish burger. It is a big day for burger lovers. Wendy's, the world's third largest food chain, is launching in Australia this morning.
Surfers Paradise, if you're there, pop in. First local Wendy's store in more than 40 years. Hopes to take on McDonald's, Subway and the rest of the quick service restaurant sector here in Australia. A crowd called Flynn Group has the rights to Wendy's in Australia. Now, Flynn Group is a huge organisation. It has thousands of Wendy in the US. It's got thousands of Wendy's, Arby's, Applebee's, Taco Bell stores. It actually owns Pizza Hut in Australia, so it knows this market. What's Wendy's famous for? Well, square burger patties. But I always think about that red-headed girl with pigtails. Do you remember, the person? She's got freckles and pigtails, and she's actually the founder's daughter, apparently.
Oh.
There you go. They used to have 11 stores in Australia, closed them back in the early 1980s, Wendy's. It's taking on some giants. So the Fin Review put together some numbers with the help of IBIS, and we talk about Subway's being the largest quick service restaurant in terms of outlets. It's a long way behind the others, though, in terms of revenue. So if you're thinking revenue only, McDonald's, easily number one, then Hungry Jack's, Yum, which is primarily KFC, Domino's, and then Subway.
So will you be testing out Wendy's? Will you give them a go? I love your enthusiasm.
I
shouldn't have asked you.
Well, I don't eat meat, and so fast food restaurants are very. Not that I'm promoting anyone here, but Guzman does do quite good non-meat eater options.
Do they do fish tacos and things?
Oh, I don't know if they do fish tacos, but they actually do they just do vegetarian options, which is pretty good.
Right. Okay. I shouldn't have asked you. I should have just known that you weren't going to do it. I will do it. I will gladly do it. And good. because I'm doing it for fear and greed, it is a tax deduction. Turning to international news now, Sean, authorities in Los Angeles have detained a number of people for looting, which is just disgusting, as arrests over theft and curfew violations rise while the fires, they continue to burn.
They sure do. 9 have been charged with looting, 1 person with arson, believe it or not. In total, 40 people have been arrested in that area in the past week or so, mostly burglary rather than looting, mostly burglary. Mandatory curfews have been imposed in some evacuation zones, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That is primarily about looting and theft to prevent that. So people have left their homes, obviously. They've evacuated, but people moving back into those areas and thieving. There's also been impersonators of FEMA, so Federal Emergency Management Agency, of first responders, fireys, ambulance people. it's hard to actually comment on that. It's atrocious, but it's also fascinating that people see this as an opportunity.
Yeah. It brings out the worst in some people.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. US mediators have sent the final draft of a ceasefire proposal to Israel and Hamas amid a breakthrough in talks over a deal to end the war in Gaza and secure the release of hostages.
Media is reporting it's the closest the two sides have been to reaching an agreement thus far. This has been going on for 15 months. The deal appears to have been brokered by the US, Egypt, and Qatar. Joe Biden, the US president, said we're at the brink. That's how he put it. A little bit of Trump diplomacy might be working in this. He previously has said if this war isn't over by the time he's elected, there'll be all hell to pay. Trump diplomacy is an odd thing, but I suppose the fact that there's so much uncertainty about what that actually means from him, maybe that's encouraging Hamas at least he's been very pro-Israel thus far, but maybe that's encouraging Hamas to come to the table. Who knows?
All right, Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. Your guest today, Steve Ween from Jarden Australia, really looking at those big weight loss companies, the ones that produce the things like Ozempic and Wegovy. It is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of January, 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.